We have an update on what was initially reported as a stabbing behind Hugo's off South Columbia Road in Grand Forks at 6:23 p.m. Saturday.
Altitude Station 3, can you respond to Hugo's on South Columbia? Hugo's 1315 South Columbia for an adult male who's been stabbed. He's bleeding and stumbling around outside. Law enforcement is not yet on scene.
Now, I talked with Sergeant Brown of the Grand Forks Police Department, who says this was a non-life-threatening, self-inflicted wound out behind the grocery store here on 13th Avenue South. The subject was checked out. Since this is a medical issue, no, the subject will not be identified, but again, it was a self-inflicted, non-life-threatening wound. Here's a look at the latest statistics regarding COVID in North Dakota long-term care facilities across eastern North Dakota. Golden Acres Manor in Foster County, Carrington, 64-bed facility with 28 residents and 28 staff members now infected. Wedgwood Manor in Cavalier, 40-bed facility, 16 residents, 4 staff infected. Eventide in Devil's Lake, 82-bed facility, 14 residents, 10 staff members infected. Edgewood in Fargo, 153-bed facility, 12 residents, 4 staff members. The Meadows in Fargo, 110-bed facility, 13 residents, 9 staff members infected. Mapleview Memory Care in Grand Forks, 36-bed facility with 25 residents infected and 7 staff members. Ave Maria in Jamestown, a 100-bed facility, 20 residents and 18 staff members infected. Eventide in Jamestown, 115-bed facility with 16 residents and 13 staff members infected. In Valley City, Bridgeview Estates, 44-bed facility, 14 residents, 6 staff members, and Cheyenne Care Center in Valley City, 170-bed facility, 28 residents and 28 staff members infected. And finally, the Benedictine Living Center, St. Catharines and Wahpeton, 52-bed facility with 11 residents and 8 staff members infected. And Eventide Shan Crossings in West Fargo, 64-bed facility with 12 residents and 5 staff members infected. Again, that was a look at long-term care facilities across eastern North Dakota with double-digit infections. Statewide, a total number of residents of 555 cases, and in staff members of 570 cases, according to the most recent data. Here's a sobering look at death statistics across North Dakota and Minnesota and where they stand on this Saturday evening. North Dakota has a population of 762,069. Minnesota's population, 5,640,000. As of this Saturday, there have now been 834 deaths in North Dakota, 3,201 deaths in Minnesota. You divide that out, North Dakota residents now, 1 out of every 913 people in North Dakota have died from COVID. In Minnesota, 1 out of every 1,762 residents has died from COVID. This was a scene in the parking lot of All True Hospital in Grand Forks last night. Dozens of people got together to pray for 5th grade teacher Tim Rigg of Grand Forks, who's now hospitalized in critical condition on a ventilator suffering from a COVID infection. The event was organized by a friend, Josh Jones.
This is an event. Our dear friend Tim Rigg is in the hospital right now. He is, they have him sedated. He is on a ventilator and he's got COVID-related pneumonia. And this was an opportunity for us to get together and lift the community up and all the workers and everybody at All True.
Now here's the latest on Tim Rigg's condition on this Saturday afternoon from a Facebook post by his wife, Stacy Kay, saying Tim's condition is still extremely critical. Stacy says, here are some specifics to pray for and things to pray for protection against. Overall, the triggered inflammation and injury to his body will end and allow for recovery, for his immune system to function properly and effectively, for his lungs to be free of infection and inflammation, to allow oxygen into the blood, and pray against vascular complications. Some patients are developing large clots, which can backflow and break off and block flow to downstream organs. And the heart, please pray against any weakening of his heart's function, and pray that he can receive nutrition. And pray against blood clots in the vessels to his gut, kidneys. Pray for good function and protection from clots. Brain, pray for peace, for good sedation effect, for relief from any pain. Again, that's from his wife, Stacy K. Is Tim Rigg, a fifth grade teacher in Grand Forks, in critical condition at Altru, battling COVID. A Facebook or GoFundMe page has been set up. Just search for Tim Rigg if you'd like to help the family out with expenses. 19-year-old Floren Crossdog of Grand Forks is facing felony charges of robbery and burglary. A second male suspect in the case has not been charged yet. According to court documents, on Thursday at 9:14 p.m., Grand Forks police were dispatched to an apartment on a report of a robbery in progress. A female victim stated her ex-boyfriend, who has not been charged yet, broke into her apartment, grabbed her by the jaw, and hit her multiple times in the face. That's when another man at the apartment stepped in to help, trying to force the suspect out of the apartment. Then Crossdog allegedly came into the apartment wielding a knife and cut the man who was trying to help above the eye. Crossdog and the other suspect fled, and Crossdog was arrested later at 820 North 6th Street. Police stated that Crossdog admitted to allegedly going to the apartment to roll the female suspect for cash and marijuana. 29-year-old Devin Wilson of St. Paul is in the Stearns County Jail in St. Cloud, facing a string of charges after allegedly assaulting a state trooper on a Thursday. The Minnesota State Patrol says Wilson was arrested without incident at around 6:30 p.m. Thursday evening near Sagatagan Lake on the campus of St. John's University. A manhunt for him began just after 7:30 Thursday morning when Wilson assaulted a State Patrol trooper during a traffic stop and DWI investigation on I-94 near Freeport. After a vehicle pursuit, Wilson fled on foot near St. John's University in St. Joseph. The State Patrol trooper who was assaulted suffered multiple fractures to his jaw, which required a surgery on Friday. No force was used when Wilson was taken into custody. Here's a state trooper to talk more about the incident.
Thursday morning on Interstate 94 near Freeport, Minnesota, one of our state troopers made a traffic stop, just like state troopers do every single day on our roads. That traffic stop changed quickly when the impaired driver, for no apparent reason, attacked our state trooper and ultimately assaulted him. The driver then fled, both in his vehicle and then on foot. And after a long day of searching involving many law enforcement agencies, thankfully this dangerous person was taken into custody. I'd like to particularly thank the Stearns County Sheriff's Office, the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, the Department of Corrections, the many Minnesota State Patrol troopers, and the other law enforcement agencies who spent all day searching to safely bring this person into custody. I'd also like to take a minute to mention that this is a reminder of just how dangerous this profession can be. And while the vast majority, almost all traffic stops happen without any altercation at all, this one turned, and it turned very quickly. And I'm thankful that the end result wasn't worse for our trooper. We anticipate that he'll make a full recovery after healing from the injuries that he sustained. I'm thankful for his courage, his dedication, his poise, and his ability to maintain his composure throughout this incident. Thank you to everyone who supports the men and women of the Minnesota State Patrol.
We have an update regarding a police pursuit involving UND and Grand Forks Police Thursday afternoon, the story that only iNewZ brought you. 22-year-old Christian Evans of Grand Forks is now facing 2 felony charges of reckless endangerment and preventing arrest after an officer wound up using a taser to control him during his arrest. Evans is also facing 3 misdemeanor charges of refusal to halt, reckless driving, and driving under suspension. According to court documents, it all started just after 3 o'clock Thursday afternoon when a UND officer tried to pull him over on a traffic stop and he fled. Evans allegedly then stopped the vehicle and fled on foot as Grand Forks officers set up a perimeter, and a canine tracking dog was brought in, and officers found Evans hiding in a small shed near University Park. Evans then allegedly took off running again, jumping fences, and finally being arrested, which included being tased. The officer stated in the report that Evans has a prior conviction of fleeing. With skyrocketing COVID numbers in the state, North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum today brought in doctors to lobby for everyone to wear masks and use social distancing.
But we are in record territory for the wrong reasons. We've reported over 25,000 new positive cases so far this month in November. That's more than the record we set in the month of October of 22,810, and we still have 10 days left in November. This incredible increase in cases is pushing pressure on our hospitalization. We know that cases drive hospitalizations.
During these big gatherings, Thanksgiving, we need to be smart. We need to be thoughtful. We need to not have the huge gatherings where all of us can get infected. I have a 99-year-old patient in the nursing home who did very well. And I've seen young, healthy people without any comorbid conditions be devastated or even killed from the disease. In our hospital, in the last 2 weeks, we've had 3 members from the same family that have passed away from COVID.
Something to think about as we all move closer to our Thanksgiving holiday. We have an update regarding an early Friday morning shooting at 1109 2nd Avenue South in Fargo. This from Fargo Police. Quote, this morning, the information officers had prior to arriving on the scene was the shooter was still inside the house and the victim was laying on the sidewalk. When officers arrived, the caller was outside the suspect's address, waving for officers to come assist. The caller told officers the shooter was in the upstairs apartment and the victim was lying on the sidewalk by the house with a gunshot wound. Officers eventually made contact with Logan Arens, 24 years old of Fargo. Arens came out of the house, walked down to officers, and surrendered. After further investigation, Arens was arrested for aggravated assault and burglary. The charges will be reviewed by the state's attorney's office and may be amended if deemed appropriate. Arens and the victim knew each other. At the time of this release, the victim is alive and being treated at a local hospital. It's an ongoing investigation. That from Fargo Police.
The wife and adult son of Twin City area man who disappeared in 2013 have now been charged in his death. 62-year-old Connie Herbst and 26-year-old Austin Herbst were arrested Thursday near their New Prague home, the death of Gary Herbst. A dog found his skull south of Barron, Wisconsin in December of 2017 and brought it home to its owner. Barron County Sheriff's deputies found her skeletal remains soon after. Those remains were finally identified this past June, and investigators began gathering evidence that led to the charges.
And a Minnesota man has pleaded guilty to helping set fire to a Minneapolis police station during civil unrest in the days following the death of George Floyd. 26-year-old Bryce Michael Williams pleaded guilty Thursday to one count of conspiracy to commit arson. According to the indictment, he and several others breached a fence around the station on May 28th, and Williams helped light a Molotov cocktail, which another man carried into the building to start the fire. The burning of the precinct and dozens of other buildings led to the governor to call in the National Guard to stop the unrest.
Sarah Red Owl of Kyle, South Dakota is facing felony charges in Jamestown after allegedly stealing a Lincoln and taking it for a spin to the bar in nearby Ypsilanti. According to court documents, on Tuesday afternoon, a man reported his 2008 Lincoln had been stolen from his garage in Jamestown. A couple of hours later, a deputy spotted the car by Ypsilanti, and Red Owl and another man inside the Ypsilanti bar and said they looked out of place. Red Owl wound up being arrested and, according to court documents, told the deputy that they'd been left in Jamestown without enough warm clothes, no cell service, no money or food. It was her idea to take the car when she discovered it running in the garage after being cold hungry and wanting to get to Fargo. Well, she's now been charged with felonies of burglary and unauthorized use of a vehicle.
And then this news, more than 900 staff members at the Mayo Clinic Health System have been diagnosed with COVID-19 over the last 2 weeks. Dr. Amy Williams is Executive Dean of Mayo Clinic Practice. She said this week that number accounts for 30% of all staff that have contracted COVID-19 since the pandemic began. And she said 93% of the sickened staff were exposed in the community, not at work. She says that just shows how widespread the virus is. The health system has Midwest locations in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa, but didn't specify where the affected employees were located.
Prosecutors in the upcoming trial of a former Minneapolis police officer charged with killing George Floyd want to introduce evidence of a 2017 arrest in which they say the officer held his knee on the back of the 14-year-old boy and ignored his pleas that he couldn't breathe. Prosecutors say body camera video that captured the boy's arrest shows that Derek Chauvin uses unreasonable force when dealing with a suspect who doesn't immediately comply with his orders. Chauvin's attorney argues that the force used was in keeping a former department policy. Floyd, a black man who was handcuffed, passed away this summer.
Neil Carlson here. On the phone with me is Lieutenant Derek Zimmel, the Grand Forks Police Department. You guys kind of started a new way of allocating officers called Power Shift. What's that all about?
Well, on an annual basis, we generally take a department-wide review and consider calls for service, officer time, the number of officers that we have available, and how are we best allocating those officers to be the most efficient and effective agency we can be. And we have noticed an increase in calls for service during the afternoon and early evening hours, and those are times that only one shift is typically on duty. So we decided to try adding a fourth shift this year, and the shift overlaps our day shift and our evening shift, and so provides a few extra officers during those times when call density is increased, provide some overlap when we're doing shift change to ensure that we've got officers out on the street answering calls for service. And we figured we'd give this a try for a year and see how it works. So that's
is this like usually later in the afternoon, more car crashes, people coming out of work and after they get home? Or?
Well, when you think about the afternoon and evening hours, it's towards the end of the school day and when school is letting out. It's towards the end of a lot of work days. The evening hours are when people get home from work and out shopping, so there's going to be increased traffic density, so increased crashes. We might have an increase in calls for service, juvenile-related, and things of that nature. So it was just something that we saw that our officers were awful busy during those times, and this is a way that we took an officer or two off of each shift and put them towards this overlapping shift to see if we can't relieve some of that pressure and put the most officers out there where they can do the most good.
Okay, so basically during that time, there's around 4 more officers out on the street?
Well, it depends on who's taking a day off and whatnot, but at least a couple more officers out there during those times that we noticed are a little busier than average to see if we can alleviate some of that pressure.
2 separate fires in the Baudette area this week. The Williams Fire Department was called to assist Warroad on a mobile home fire near Roosevelt that occurred around 10 p.m. Thursday, November 12th. According to a GoFundMe page started by a family member, the mobile home was the residence of Holly Erickson and Bugsy Chandler. While Erickson and Chandler safely escaped the fire, several pets did not. The mobile home and all its contents were destroyed in the fire. Then on Sunday afternoon around 1:16 p.m., the Baudette Fire Department was called to a fire on the Birchview Drive north of Baudette. The blaze consumed a 40 by 60 foot Quonset owned by Richard Grant. The contents of the Quonset were also destroyed and included a motor home, a four-wheeler, and multiple tools, among other items. No one was injured in this fire, which was determined to be accidental in nature. The Williams Fire Department, Lake of the Woods Ambulance, and Lake of the Woods Sheriff's Office also responded to the scene. I just talked with Brett Burkholder of the Grand Forks County Jail, the administrator, who says they now have 88 of their 195 inmates who have tested positive for COVID. Burkholder says they've had meetings today with the Department of Corrections and many other officials across the state, but there's little they can do to stop it. Inside the facility, the smallest cells are two-person cells or larger, and then there's a dormitory with 36 beds. So he says basically there's no way to keep everyone apart, and so COVID is kind of running rampant there. Burkholder said he's been talking with many officials and he's been told that he's following the guidelines that are in place. But at this point, he says there's so many people that are asymptomatic when they bring them in there, there's no way to know if they're positive or not. He says they're testing every week. But again, there's no way to basically keep everyone apart in the facility. 21-year-old Alacio Turney of Bemidji has been charged with felony domestic assault. According to court documents, on November 13th at 7:29 p.m., Bemidji police responded to the Pine Ridge Apartments for a report of a domestic assault. The female victim reported Turney allegedly struck her in the face repeatedly, choked her, and wrestled her to the ground. Turney has previous assault and terroristic threat convictions. Two men who stated they just got off the bus from Florida to Bemidji, no booking photos available, have now been charged with burglary. Diego Zamora of Doral, Florida, has been charged with felony burglary and misdemeanor false name or ID card to peace officer. And Gabriel Martinez of Miami has been charged with felony burglary and misdemeanor fleeing on foot. According to court documents, on November 13th at 5:58 p.m., officers responded to 311 8th Street Northwest for a residential burglar alarm. A second-story window of the residence was broken out, but nothing was missing. The pair was arrested nearby, trying to flee the scene. A man and woman have been charged in connection to a brutal crime at Natowash, Minnesota. 26-year-old Antonio Avila of Mahnomen has been charged with felony, obstructing investigation, aiding an offender, and 26-year-old Talina Lightfeather of Langby has been charged with felony, aid and abet attempted murder, and felony assault a dangerous weapon. According to court documents, on November 4th at 6:56 p.m., officers were called to Tower Street in Natowash for a stabbing. A woman reported hearing a knock at the door. Her 5-year-old son opened the door and was punched in the face. As the woman ran toward her son, she was attacked by the man and woman. The woman allegedly held a handgun to her neck and made a comment about having sex with her man. Then the woman's victim, 18-year-old son, came to help and was stabbed multiple times. The male suspect was heard yelling to the female suspect, "Got him, got him." The male and female suspects then fled the area in a vehicle. The stabbing victim had to be life-flighted for emergency surgery with a perforated liver and damage to his gallbladder. An investigation led to the suspects and their arrest the next day. They've denied any involvement. 31-year-old Abdon Sanchez Jr. has been charged with felonies of possession with intent to manufacture or deliver meth and possession of drug paraphernalia, along with a misdemeanor charge of actual physical control in Grand Forks District Court. According to court records, today at 1:44 a.m., he was found slumped over the wheel in his vehicle on Highway 81 by Grand Forks. An ambulance was called because Sanchez said he felt dizzy. He produced a bag of marijuana in the ambulance, which led to a search of his vehicle and the seizure of 141 grams of meth. We now have details behind a bizarre and dangerous incident at UND Housing in early October. 21-year-old Ernest Lee Jr. of Grand Forks is now facing 7 felony charges for allegedly assaulting UND police officers, severely burning himself, and being hospitalized. We begin with my October 3rd report from the scene just after it happened. Neil Carlson here with some breaking news out of Grand Forks early on a Saturday morning. We've had a man injured in a fire incident. This is on the 3900 block of University Avenue. Fire crews were called just after midnight.
Ultra Station 2, can you respond to 3904 University Avenue? 3904 University Avenue, there's an active fire. I'll page out all stations. We need you emergently.
3904 University Avenue. Male subject may have set himself on fire.
Now, as of this Monday evening, November 16th, Ernest Lee Jr. has not been booked into jail yet. No booking photo. It's not clear yet if he's still hospitalized. But according to the criminal complaint, on October 3rd at 12:16 a.m., UND officers arrived on the scene at 3904 University Avenue for a possible domestic violence incident in progress. Officers observed 2 females frantically running out of the apartment building. It was later discovered that they ran out of an apartment next door because they were in fear for their life of what was happening in the next door apartment. Officers approached the door of the apartment where they could hear a lot of yelling and things being broken. Another officer arrived on the scene and stated that exterior windows were being broken out and they needed to make entry. Officers keyed into the apartment because they thought someone's life may be in danger. As officers opened the door, they observed a fire that was on the stovetop as well as a fire in the oven. Officers could hear a male yelling and screaming. The male was later identified as Ernest Lee Jr. He was nude and irate. There were multiple objects that were being broken and blood covering the apartment. Multiple commands were given for Lee to come out with his hands up. Lee did not comply. Lee charged the officers with a chair and threw it, but they stepped out of the way. Lee then threw himself on the flame of the stovetop, and he caught himself on fire and burned himself. An officer grabbed Lee off the fire, and Lee charged off another officer. After a successful taser deployment, an officer attempted to place Lee in handcuffs, but he shoved the officer out of the way and charged another officer. That officer deployed another taser, and it was unsuccessful. Another officer kicked Lee, and Lee fell to the ground. Officers then attempted to detain Lee again, but he broke free and continued running down the hallway. Another successful taser deployment, and officers were able to get Lee under control and arrest him. Again, that was from the criminal complaint of allegedly what happened here on October 3rd. As of today, November 16th, Ernest Lee Jr. has been charged with 7 felonies involving criminal mischief, assaulting police officers, preventing arrest, and endangering by fire. He's scheduled to make his first court appearance on December 9th. I'm Neil Carlson reporting for iNewZ.TV.